Welcome to the Justin Strawn Podcast. I am your host, Justin Strawn. Glad to be back with you on a Wednesday morning and getting some recording out as we get ready for the upcoming Egg Bowl. We get ready for a pretty big weekend in terms of movies. Got a couple of big releases coming out. I don't know if I'll be going to see any of them this weekend, but we'll eventually catch some of them. But yeah, we're getting into award season for films, so you'll definitely be seeing some pretty big releases at the theater in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be talking about those things as well. We'll be discussing a couple of other things as well. We got some movie news that I want to discuss that also crosses into the world of video games. So those things are all things that I am looking forward to, and we'll get into that. Real quick, I need to go ahead and remind people about this because I keep forgetting. If you are watching on Spotify, if you're watching on YouTube, it would really help me out a whole lot if you would hit the follow button, the like button, the subscribe button, whatever it is that you're on. It would help me out a whole lot. And also, if you are listening, wherever you're listening from, if you can rate it. If you're on Apple Podcasts, where most people get a lot of their podcasts from, if you can hit that follow button or that check mark, whatever it is that allows you to follow the podcast, that would really help me out a lot. Plus, if you could hit that 5-star rating button, if you could do me a favor there and hit 5 stars, and also just put a quick little review in there. That way it shows up in more people's podcast catchers. Those are big deals to the algorithms in the podcasting world. So if you want to help me out, I would really appreciate it. You can follow me on all the social media that's out there. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Justin M. Strawn. Pretty sure that's my handle on just about all of my platforms. Instagram may be a little different, but it's pretty close. If you look up Justin Strawn, you should find me. But I'm on TikTok, putting up a lot of clips from this show on TikTok and on YouTube as well. So there's all different places you can find me and follow, and I would appreciate it if you did all those things. It will help me out a lot in getting this podcast into the ears of new listeners. So let's go ahead and get into it. Probably going to be a light show this morning. Don't have a ton to talk about, at least especially from the Mississippi State side. Obviously, State is still trying to figure out how to rebound as they head into the Egg Bowl, from trying to figure out how to rebound from their pretty lopsided loss to Missouri this past weekend as they head into the Egg Bowl next week on the day after Thanksgiving. So let's go ahead and kind of get into that. And look, as of right now, if I had to tell you, if I had to guess, I'd say Mississippi State's probably going to lose that game. They're probably going to end up being 1-7 on the year, end up with a record just shy of making it to a bowl game. That feels kind of like the way that this is going to play out. Ole Miss is a very good team, and in all likelihood, that's going to end up being the case. Now, there have been plenty of times when the lesser team has won the Egg Bowl. I can think of a few right off the top of my head. 2009, obviously, Mississippi State was not as good as an Ole Miss team that was coming in 8-3, and Mississippi State was coming in 4-7. So, and State ended up prevailing. Think about 2012. Ole Miss was 5-6. Needing a win to get into the bowl eligibility. And in 2012, Mississippi State was 8-3, kind of similar circumstances to 2009. There was 2016. Ole Miss was, I think, 7-4, and they ended up going 7-5 after Mississippi State ended up winning that game. State went 5-7, ended up going to a bowl game because of the old APR and all that kind of stuff. They didn't have enough bowl eligible teams. So, and then also you had 2017, in which State was trying to get to 9 wins, and the Nick Fitzgerald injury happens, and then State ends up losing to Ole Miss. So, like I said, there have been plenty of times when the team that is not quite as good has won the Egg Bowl. So it's not completely far-fetched that if Mississippi State were to go in to the Egg Bowl on next Friday in Starkville and win that game, it wouldn't be shocking to anybody, because I do believe this is a beatable Ole Miss team. If you look at what they've done and what they've done consistently throughout the course of this season, they haven't always played up to what you would think they should. They've kind of played down their competition. They've kind of played up to their competition as well when you look at the Georgia and the Oklahoma games. But here's the deal. your best chance for winning this game, if you're Mississippi State, I think. And I think the one thing that is working heavily in Mississippi State's favor, and it's probably the only thing that's really working heavily in Mississippi State's favor, is you have the Lane Kiffin saga currently playing out on social media, out in the public. And that's kind of the thing that might be the great equalizer for you if you're Mississippi State. And this kind of happened back in 2022. And it wasn't nearly as lopsided. Ole Miss had a pretty good year up until like the last 4 or 5 games of the season, and it just kind of collapsed on them at that point. But Lane Kiffin was heavily rumored to go to Auburn, and then John Sokoloff basically said Lane is going to Auburn. It's a done deal. And after that happened, he ended up going on Twitter and like just going after John Sokoloff repeatedly because he made that claim on Twitter, and it ended up staying at Ole Miss, and he's been there ever since. And right now you have a lot more smoke around the situation with Lane Kiffin possibly leaving. Florida fans and boosters have made it pretty clear ever since the year started, and it was obvious that Billy Napier, after he lost to South Florida, once he lost to South Florida, that was it for Florida fans. They wanted Billy Napier gone. He pretty much underperformed throughout the course of the year, and let's be honest, they have, I think, 3 wins on the year. They should only have 2 if Mississippi State had not just crapped the bed and Blake Shapen threw that interception at the very end of the game. They should have another loss on their hand, but they don't. So like I said, Florida has had Lane Kiffin. I mean, they have been all in on the Lane train ever since really the middle of the season. The beginning of the season. Like I said, after they lost to South Florida, they were like, that's it. We're done. Billy Napier did enough to save his job last year. That wasn't going to happen this year after they lost to South Florida. LSU obviously would love to get in on it. There are rumors there, or not rumors. There are reports that Lane's family was in Baton Rouge on Monday morning. Apparently, they'd already taken a trip to Gainesville as well. So you have all this stuff flying around. You have all this circling around that Lane Kiffin might be headed to someplace else. And like I said, this is the thing that can possibly open the door for you as a Mississippi State fan to possibly win this game. Because this is a distraction. There's no question about it. It is a distraction. You've got, apparently, whether or not it's true or not, depends on who you ask, but there was a report that was sent out earlier this week that Ole Miss basically gave Lane Kiffin a deadline and said, you have to make a decision before the Egg Bowl if you're going to be with us or if you're going to go to LSU or if you're going to Florida. Lane Kiffin has denied that. He denied that on the Pat McAfee show. Look, I don't know what the truth is. I have no idea. But as long as this stuff is swirling, as long as this stuff is being played out in the public media, in the public atmosphere, then you've got a chance for this team to be distracted. Because look, a lot of these players, if he does leave, if he does go to LSU or if he does go to Florida, he will end up taking a lot of his players with him because of the way that the transfer portal works these days, and because of the way that NIL works, he'll end up taking a lot of his players with him. So, there's a lot of players who may know just right off the top of their head, and I don't know Ole Miss's roster well enough to be able to tell you who would go and who wouldn't go. I don't know who all has eligibility. I would assume Trinidad Chambliss, if he has eligibility left, that would be one of Lane Kiffin's top priorities. Like I said, I don't know if that is the case or not in terms of getting him to follow him to wherever he ends up going. If he ends up leaving, I would think the same thing for Kewan Lacey. If Lacey has eligibility, I don't know what his status is. I have no clue about that. So, like I said, that wouldn't surprise me at all if he ends up taking him with him if he has eligibility left. Like I said, so there's going to be some people that are definitely going to be going with him, but he can't take the entire roster with him. There are going to be players at LSU and Florida that he'll want to keep. And this, like I said, this is just assuming that he leaves. And I don't know if he's going to leave or not. But so that's going to be a distraction. Some people are going to be wondering, some of those players that are on the field are going to be wondering, if he leaves, am I going with him? Am I going to be forced to stay here? And if I'm forced to stay here, where is there going to be a spot for me? Because some of whoever Ole Miss would hire in his place may want to bring in some of their own players, and there may not be a spot for him. So this is the type of stuff. When people say that this is a distraction, this is what they're talking about, especially in today's world of college athletics. A few years ago, it wasn't quite as big of a deal. I mean, even as far as like 6, 7 years ago, it really wasn't that big of a deal because transferring wasn't as easy of a thing to do, because if you did transfer, you had to sit out a year. Most players don't want to sit out a year. So like I said, this is one of the reasons why it could be a distraction. You don't know where, if you're an Ole Miss fan, right? If you're an Ole Miss player right now, you may not know where you're going to be playing until this whole situation is completely settled. And like I said, that's where the door can be open for Mississippi State. If there's more concerned about, am I going to be playing for Ole Miss? Am I going to be transferring to Florida or LSU? Or am I going to be just transferring in general because I don't know what my coach is going to end up doing? Then it can be a distraction, and it can open the door for Mississippi State to win this game. Look, I don't know what Lane Kiffin is going to do. I have no idea. Is he going to stay? Maybe. Is he going to leave? Maybe. I don't know. I know there's a lot of State fans who are saying that this is a typical Ole Miss flip our own guy type situation. There's a lot of Mississippi State fans who believe that that's the way that this thing is going to play out. That Ole Miss is doing this, that they are letting Lane purposely flirt heavily with LSU, flirt heavily with Florida, and who knows, maybe some other team as well. I don't know, but flirt heavily with those teams and then they can come back and say Lane chose us over those other big programs. And maybe that's the case. Maybe that is what's going to end up happening. I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, there is a history of that at Ole Miss, and we'll just kind of see if that ends up being the case. But like I said, if you want an opportunity to win this game, this is probably your best hope that the Ole Miss players, and Lane Kiffin for that matter, is completely distracted by everything else that's swirling around in the media, and you can end up winning this game. It doesn't help the fact that that both teams have bye weekends this weekend, and it's going to just continue to play out, and the drama is going to continue to ratchet up while we get ready to go into the Egg Bowl the day after Thanksgiving. So, like I said, I don't know what's going to happen. Do I hope he leaves? Yes, I do. I'm not going to lie. I don't want him to be there. He has done a really good job with Ole Miss. He's going to get them into the playoff. And look, if Mississippi State wins, they might not make the playoff. There is a possibility that they could be left out if they don't win the Egg Bowl. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think it will cost them a home game. I think that's very much going to be the case, is they won't play at home if they lose Mississippi State. But I don't know if it will completely keep them out of if it will completely keep them out of the playoff. But if you're a Mississippi State fan, yeah, you want them to leave, because you look at what happened. Look what happened with Auburn and Alabama. Once Nick Saban got there, yeah, Auburn had some good years. They had a few years of which they did okay, but Auburn has been kind of left behind by Alabama, and they don't compete nearly as well as they did before Nick Saban got there, and they've been struggling to figure it out ever since. And that's kind of where you are. That's kind of the road that you're heading down with Mississippi State right now and Ole Miss, because ever since he got there, Mississippi State is 1-5 against. Well, assuming that they lose this year, they will be 1-5 against Lane Kiffin, and trying to overcome that program when you're directly competing with them for recruits, for resources in your state, it makes it difficult. So yeah, do I want him to go? Absolutely. I'm hoping he goes somewhere else, because it will make things easier for Mississippi State if he's not there. And I don't have a problem admitting that. I don't think most Mississippi State fans have a problem admitting that. So yeah, do I want him gone? Absolutely. Would I want him to go to LSU or Florida? Look, I don't care. I mean, Mississippi State's not going to play both those teams every single year. But yeah, I'm all for him leaving and going somewhere else, and if I were Lane Kiffin, would I leave Ole Miss? Yeah, he doesn't have any ties there. And look, I know a lot of people are saying, well, look, he's proven he can win, and he can win the national championship here at Ole Miss. He hadn't done it yet. Okay, I don't think this is the year that even if he ends up staying, I don't think this is the year that Ole Miss wins the national championship. Could they get to the second or third round? Yeah, I don't think they get past the third round, though. And that's kind of the issue. Look, Ole Miss has they've accumulated a lot of resources. They've gone all in on NIL. They've gone all in on giving Lane whatever it is that he wants to try to make that team as competitive as possible. but they will never be able to match what LSU and Florida can do because they just simply have more resources. They just do. They have bigger stadiums. They have bigger financial budgets. They have bigger athletic budgets. It's just a fact of life. That is what it is. They don't have as much resources as though they don't have as many resources as those schools. Part of it for LSU is they're the only really big school in the state. Yeah, there's a bunch of other smaller schools, but those other smaller schools don't compete for any of the types of resources that LSU gets. Florida obviously has a few other big schools they have to compete with, but Florida is a much larger state. They have a lot more in terms of resources, in terms of where they get revenue from, in terms of tourism and all that type of stuff, because of the fact that the entire state is surrounded by beaches for the most part. And the fact that it's a tourist heavy state brings in a ton of revenue for that state, and they can pour it into, those types of revenue can be poured into the school. They just are going to have more resources. And because of that, they'll always be able to win more at those places than you can at Ole Miss. It's just a fact of life. I mean, that's just, so like I said, I mean, yeah, Lane Kiffin could win a championship at Ole Miss. He might. There's a very good possibility that could end up being the case, but he can always win a lot more if he is somewhere else. And that's just the cold, hard truth of the race. That's just the cold, hard truth. He can win more if he ends up going to LSU or Florida. He just can. So, all right, let's talk about Mississippi State basketball real quick. Mississippi State is playing the Kansas State Wildcats on Thursday night. They are playing, I think it's at Starkville, is it? Or are they on the road this weekend? No, they're playing at Kansas State. It's in the Hall of Fame Classic. I don't know. Actually, it's not in Kansas. I don't know where the Hall of Fame Classic actually is. But when they play that game, they're going to end up playing somebody else on Saturday, I do believe, as well. But they play at 8:30. Kansas State is currently 4-0. They are led by PJ Haggerty, who is scoring 26 points per game. So, look, they've got a big challenge. Kansas State is not ranked, neither is Mississippi State. And we've seen how Mississippi State has played these first two games. At least we've seen how the basketball team has played these first two games. Here's the deal. If you lose this game to Kansas State, it doesn't keep you out of the tournament. That's not going to be the case. But here's the deal. You need to win some of these games. Mississippi State scheduled a pretty difficult non-conference schedule this year. Like I said, they played Iowa State last week. They're playing Kansas State this week. And like I said, I don't remember who else is in this classic thing that they're playing in. But they'll have another pretty decent opponent, regardless of whether or not they win or lose. They got Memphis on the schedule. They've got Utah on the schedule. So they've got a relatively tough non-conference schedule. And look, losing to good opponents doesn't keep you out of the NCAA tournament, but you got to win some of them at some point. Because the more L's you take to good opponents, the less likely it is that you're going to end up as a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or 6, or 7 seed, and you're going to end up right back in that 8, 9, 10, 11 range, where you're not really expected to get out of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. It has been almost 30, well, it will have been 30 years since Mississippi State made it past the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, when the NCAA tournament takes place in 2026. 30 years. The last time they made it past the first weekend was when they went to the Final Four back in 1996. That's a really long time to go without making it past the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. And if you want to have a better opportunity to do so, you got to win some games and give yourself a better seeding so you're not playing the best teams in the first and second round. And unfortunately, if they can't pull off some of these wins, that's what they're looking at, even if they can rebound. I mean, the other issue you have is if you end up losing this weekend, and if you lose both games this weekend, which would be just absolutely devastating, what hope do you have that this team is going to rebound? Look, it's a long season, and you can get better, and you can figure things out before conference play starts, but you wouldn't have a whole lot of hope going into conference play once it starts in January. And So they've got to find a way to win some of these games. It's going to be a tough game. Kansas State, like I said, is 4-0. They've got some good players. They've got some guys who can score. It's going to be difficult. They're going to have to figure out their rotations, and they're going to have to figure out who's going to actually contribute to this team. Trying to play 10, 11, 12 guys isn't going to cut it. That's just way too many. You've got to figure out who your real contributors are, and get all of those guys 20 plus minutes, and make sure the guys that can go out there and contribute at the same level that Josh Hubbard is contributing at, get those guys 30 plus minutes, because Josh Hubbard's going to be playing 30 plus minutes, and you need to figure that out. Look, I think Sean Jones is definitely going to be one of those guys. He's one of the few guys that's returning from this team this year. He's one of the few that they brought back. A lot of the guys transferred. And I've always liked Sean Jones. I think he's really good. But he's probably having to step up into a role that maybe he wasn't prepared for and ready for, to basically be the number 2 guy on the team. So I'll be very interested to see if they can kind of figure out the rotations, because they need to start figuring it out. That's been one of the biggest issues they've had through these first 3 games, when, they've won 2 of them, but they've underperformed in 2, and they got blown out by Iowa State in that 3rd game. So they've got to figure out the rotations. They got to figure out who's going to be the best contributors for this team, and get those guys playing together and gelling together and playing as a much more cohesive team. So take place on Thursday night, 8:30 on Peacock. And if you don't have Peacock subscription, I think they have a free trial, and you can get one at least for this weekend when State is playing in this little tournament thing that they've got going on. So, all right, let's turn our attention to some movie and television stuff. Just TV stuff. So, next Wednesday, the newest season of Stranger Things is dropping, or the last season of Stranger Things is dropping. I talked a little bit about this on the previous show. I've started rewatching it. I've rewatched the first season, and here's the thing: it's been a while. It had been a while since I'd seen Stranger Things, and I think Stranger Things. When did it first debut? I think it debuted in 2015. I think, if I remember correctly. Let me see if I can look that up. Season 1, Stranger Things. Yeah, it was 2016. So it's been 9 years since the beginning of Stranger Things. And I went back and watched the first season. And this is the only season where those actors are age appropriate. It's the only one where they are age appropriate. And it does make a difference. Look, I love this show. I think it's arguably my favorite show of all time. I love that first season. I was a little worried about it because, look, I don't like scary stuff. If you listen to my other podcast, when I was doing with Ryan, the Main Attraction podcast, I talked on there quite a bit. I don't do scary. It's not my thing. I was a little concerned it would be a little too scary, but it's really not. It is a little, it can be a little scary at times, but it's really not that scary. But like I said, having those actors be age appropriate it does really make a difference. And I have loved all 4 seasons. And I know, like I said, I know some people don't like the seasons that follow quite as much as they like that first one, but I've loved all 4 seasons. But there's something about season 1. They captured something. There's something just kind of magical about that first season that just makes it stand apart from all the other ones. Like I said, I think they're all really good, but what they were doing in that first season with those kids, bringing those kids in and just really nailing the casting of that, because a show that relies as heavily on kid actors as that first season did, obviously, these actors aren't kids anymore. I think they're all in their 20s now. Most of them are married, if I'm not mistaken. But bringing those kids in, relying so heavily on these kid actors, it's a risky strategy for a television show, because kid actors are not always that great. I mean, there's a reason why we don't typically just put shows around and revolve them around child actors. So, like I said, there is a reason for that. But all of them were just absolutely phenomenal. And you can, if you go and watch how they have progressed and how they have changed, look, they've all gotten a lot better. And it's really kind of surprising that and maybe it's because of the fact they've just been tied up with Stranger Things, but it's just kind of surprising to me that they have not gone, they've not gone to much bigger and better things. Now, obviously, Millie Bobby Brown has done a lot of things, but most of her stuff has been done with Netflix. She hasn't done her stuff outside of Netflix, and Netflix has kind of made Millie Bobby Brown their poster child. But what they were doing in that first season was just absolutely remarkable. Winona Ryder's performance in that is just an all-time performance. The way she is playing this woman who everyone around her thinks she is going crazy because of the things that she is saying, that she is seeing, and the things that, she's constantly on the lookout for Will, and she's saying that she's talking to him through these lights, and there are things crawling out of the walls of her home. This is the stuff that, would have put her in, that could have easily landed her in, an insane asylum. But she was right the entire time. It took a lot of doing to get people to believe her. And eventually people did, obviously. But like I said, that first season, there's just something about it. It's much smaller scale. It's this one Demogorgon who is terrorizing these children and terrorizing this town, and ended up killing a couple of people along the way. There, like I said, it's so much smaller, and there's so much. It has also they filmed it with more grainier picture. I don't know what they did to make it film that way, but it looks like something that might have actually taken place in the 80s instead of taking place in 2016. Well, I mean, it takes place in the 80s, but filmed in 2016. It looks like it might have been filmed in the 80s, just the way that they filmed it. And like I said, there's just something about that first season that was just so magical and just so captivating. And I think they've done a really good job of getting that same magic throughout the course of the rest of the season. There's just something about that when you get it right that first time, the first time you do it, it's just something special. And I'd forgotten about that because like I said, it has been a long time. It's been 9 years, and this is the first time I've really gone back to rewatch it. So, and I've just been in awe of what they did. The Joe Carey, what's his name? I can't remember who plays Joe Carey. Steve. The turn of Steve in like episode 6 or 7, where he goes from this absolute jerk of a character to defending these kids and just becoming one of the best characters in the entire show, is just absolutely phenomenal. I love this show. I'm ready for the final season. I can't wait for it. And I'll be very interested to see if they can really stick the landing on this thing. Like I said, really looking forward to it. I'm hoping I can catch the season finale in theaters when it releases in theaters, whenever that is. I'll have to go back and look and see when that is, because I don't remember at this point. But I still don't like this whole volume 1, volume 2 thing. I think they're doing 3 episodes or 4 episodes on volume 1, like 3 episodes in volume 2, and then the final finale will go to theaters. I don't really know. I don't like the way that Netflix is doing it. If you don't want to do your binge drop like you always have done it, just do a weekly drop and just save it. Everybody's just do it that way, like I said. But regardless. Last thing I want to talk about, this kind of crosses over into video games as well. The first photos and the first pictures of first on-set pictures of the Legend of Zelda movie that is being filmed currently and will air the first or second weekend in May of 2027 have been released. And I will just tell you, it's just 3 pictures. There's a picture of Zelda's face. There's a picture of Link's face, and there's a picture of Link and Zelda together with Zelda holding a bow and Link like sitting behind her as they look out onto like this open field. And let me just tell you, I was so just like, yeah, they nailed it. It's just 3 pictures, but like, yes, they absolutely nailed this, because I love the Zelda games. The Zelda games are just this massive exploration game. Even going back to the very first one that released, I think in 86, if I'm not mistaken, going all the way back to that game, it was an exploration game, and you just explored this huge land that, especially for at that time, it's obviously not as big as a game as Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, but it's just a massive game, and it looks like they're really capturing that. It kind of looks like this is going to be a Breath of the Wild game if you kind of look at the outfits and stuff that the 2 characters are wearing. Don't know that for certain, but it kind of feels that way. But I love the Zelda games. They are my favorite games of all time. I haven't played all of them. I played most of them, but I haven't played all of them. I never finished Tears of the Kingdom a couple of years ago when it came out, so I've gone back and started playing it again, and it is just absolutely amazing. I love Breath of the Wild. It was just an absolutely incredible experience in terms of playing Zelda, and Tears of the Kingdom has been just as good. I really would recommend, one of the reasons why I didn't finish it, I played Breath of the Wild late. I was I didn't get to it as early because I didn't have a Switch until I think 2020, 2021, somewhere around there. And so I didn't get to a chance to play Breath of the Wild until I got a Switch. And then Tears of the Kingdom, I ended up playing right after Breath of the Wild. And they are very similar. And for that reason, I was like, I kind of feel like I'm playing the same game. So getting some distance between the two of them has really helped. But I loved these Zelda games. Tears of the Kingdom is fantastic. Breath of the Wild is fantastic. It's just an epic adventure if you're playing it. And that's one of the things that makes those games just so incredibly well done. Just the scale of the adventure, going through, trying to figure out the puzzles that take place in the dungeons, in the shrines, whatever it may be. It's just absolutely fantastic. And one of the things I like about it, the puzzles can be challenging, they can be difficult, but they're not so challenging where you have to go and look up a solution to them online. There have been a couple where I've had to do that, but 9 times out of 10, whenever I walk into one of those puzzles or one of those shrines, and I'm sitting there trying to I can normally figure it out on my own. Yeah, it can be a little difficult at times, and it can be hard to figure out, but most of the time, when you are sitting there looking at it, you can okay, I kind of understand what to do. I know what I can figure it out. Yes, there are online resources for you, but you don't always have to go to those. And like I said, looking at those pictures just made me, I was already psyched about this film when they announced it. And I'm even more psyched about it after seeing these pictures. Like I said, I really feel like they're capturing what the Zelda games are supposed to be about, and what those characters are going to be about. I'll be very interested to see if they make Link talk, because technically he always talks. I mean, that's everybody says Link never talks. If you see him in the games, he actually is saying things, but they just don't give him words. I don't know why they have always taken that approach with Link in the games, because you will actually see him talk, but they never actually show us the words that he's actually speaking. They only show us the words of all the other characters. So like I said, I'll be very interested if they actually have Link talk in this. That's one of the things I'm kind of looking forward to as well. So I think they will, which will actually make some people mad if they do, but regardless. So, all right, guys, wrapping up for this week. We'll see what the Bulldogs do on the court. We'll also catch back up with Pluribus next week. Appreciate you guys listening. And as always, until next time, we'll talk to you then.